Good morning and welcome to another edition of At Issue. I'm Matt Pritchard in for Corey Smith.
And I'm Sue O'Connell. Hope you all had a nice Thanksgiving holiday. It's in the spirit of thankfulness that we'll welcome two members of the Massachusetts legislature who are leaving Beacon Hill to reflect on their service.
And speaking of gratitude, one person who's very thankful this day for several reasons is President-elect Donald Trump. Why? Well, many of the felony criminal charges that he faced have now been dismissed. Last week, special counsel Jack Smith, who charged Trump with attempting to overturn the 2020 election and mishandling classified documents, filed motions to drop the charges in those cases, and the judge agreed to do so. Now, Smith says this wasn't because the cases were weak, but because Justice Department policy does not allow the prosecution of sitting presidents. There's a possibility of reviving the prosecutions once Mr. Trump leaves office. Sue, what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, I think it's clear, Matt, that you can do whatever you want in the United States, and as long as you get elected president, there are no consequences. And I also feel bad because I've spent the past few years telling progressives to let Attorney General Merrick Garland's process play out. Well, I didn't realize he was playing out Jack Smith off the stage. So the moral of the story, I guess justice should be fair and swift.
And not the last rant we're going to hear from Sue O'Connell in this show.
Up.
A lot more to come. Moving forward, though, we're all thankful for our people who serve the public, from firefighters to police to members of our state government and legislature.
And when the legislature finally stops its work this year, 14 lawmakers will say goodbye to Beacon Hill and public service. 3 senators and 11 House members are retiring from the legislature.
Joining us are 2 House lawmakers who are stepping away from service. Representative Ruth Balzer, who has represented Newton for the past 26 years, and Representative Bill Strauss has represented several South Coast communities, including part of New Bedford, for 32 years. Thanks to both of you for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
And congratulations for such great service. I want to start with you, Ruth. You've been on Beacon Hill. You've seen historic debates on same-sex marriage. You have seen the state legalize casino gambling, medical and recreational marijuana. When you look back at your career, what do you see as some of the key work that you have done and that the state has accomplished?
Well, I did participate in all those debates, but in terms of my own focus, I'm proudest of the work I've done on mental health parity. I've helped to expand access for services to people who suffer from mental health challenges. A big achievement was passage of the Public Lands Preservation Act, which I worked on for all of 24 years till we got it passed, but that will protect our public green space. I passed women's rights legislation. As a result of my work, women no longer are charged more than men for the same insurance policies. And fire safety. Back after a terrible, tragic fire in Newton in 2000, I took about a decade to pass legislation that required more automatic sprinkler systems, and that has saved lives.
How about you, Bill? What do you look back on?
It's interesting to hear Ruth's description, and it reflects the different ways different legislators see their role. What I've tried to do, and it's hard over the course of 30 years to pick individual pieces of legislation, but I've been fortunate to represent a part of the state that at times, in reality and sometimes perception, feels neglected, left out of what I would describe as the Boston area core. And so much of the work I've been engaged in has been about either bringing the resources. Education aid was the first major piece of legislation when I came into office, or connecting in terms of the benefits, transportation networks, and to heighten the ability of other parts of the state to get the resources they want. But also, what I'm proudest of is the way I've been able to conduct the job, which is in a way that allows people to say that their legislator is on the job. Not that they always agree with me, because they don't, but that they know and can feel confident that I've exercised judgment in a thoughtful way and in an informed way. And I think that's an important legacy for anyone coming into office, is that they establish what the role of a legislator can be.
Bill, maybe I'll have you expand upon one part of your answer there where you talked about transportation. And I know one thing that you really focused on was South Coast Rail. Much of that is coming into play in 2025. What's the impact going to be of this particular part of your legacy?
Well, is a tremendous impact of the project, not just in terms of the model people tend to think today of what commuter rail is, which is to bring employees or bring people from the outer core of a metropolitan area in the beginning of the day and then back out. I think the future of passenger rail, for all sorts of reasons, traffic congestion, climate, the way work habits have changed post-COVID, is that people will move back and forth in both directions. So I think the impact on the economy in that region, my region, or around the state is going to be profound as a result of that project. But I would say, although you can find colleagues who claim sole credit for things, the legislature is a team effort. We point to the ability that we've had at different critical times to move something forward, but none of us can, frankly, in my view, do anything alone. We do it because we were able to also work with others.
Yeah.
Ruth, you entered the legislature after working as a psychologist. You're the first one, I think, actually elected to the legislature. And obviously, as you mentioned, mental health was a major part of your focus. We've come such a long way in the way people view mental health in like a 360 degree, who has it, what it is, how we all could benefit from support. What do you think the biggest strides the state has made, and what more work would you like to see done?
Well, we have made strides in making sure that insurance coverage covers mental health conditions to the same extent that they cover other medical conditions, although mental health parity in the broader sense was still not there. I mean, when you hear stories about mentally ill people sitting in emergency rooms sometimes for days before a bed is available, that wouldn't happen if you were having a cardiac problem. So we still have a ways to go on mental health parity, but I've become very involved in a related field, which is criminal justice reform. And the reason for that is because, sadly, so many people who suffer from mental illness or addictions land in our criminal justice system. And often that's because services weren't available to them in the healthcare world. And I think the state has to do more to make sure that people are not sent in the direction of the criminal justice system, but are sent to the healthcare system. I'm still there's something that's still in conference that I'm hoping will pass before I wrap up on January 1st, which is ending our, what happens in Massachusetts, which is that men who are civilly committed for addiction get sent to a prison rather than to a healthcare facility. And there is language that's in an addiction bill that is still being conferenced that would change that.
Seems like the work never ends, even when you're on the way out. Yeah, exactly.
I'm determined to see that those folks get treatment and not incarceration before I leave.
I can tell, and that's fantastic. We also want to talk, though, a little bit about what voters brought forward in November. Ballot question 1, of course, impacts the legislature in a lot of different ways, specifically whether or not the legislature should be audited by the Office of the State Auditor. How are both of you perceiving this and how the legislature moves forward with this new question? Start with you, Ruth.
Well, it's a complicated question. Everyone wants transparency. The public deserves to know what's going on in government. I actually think the legislature has taken tremendous steps in increasing transparency in recent years. Every one of our sessions is streamed live and recorded, so you can watch it when it's happening, or you can, if you missed it, you can go back and watch it. That's true of all our public hearings. All of our public hearings are now hybrid, so that anywhere you are in the state, you can sign up to testify and you can Zoom in and participate in the hearing, watch the hearing. All of our votes are transcribed on an award-winning website, the Massachusetts. So we've done a lot to increase transparency so that the voters can know what their representatives and senators are doing.
Bill, how are you viewing it?
It is as complex as Ruth indicates, and one of the things from a House member's perspective is we are, in terms of state officials, the ones closest to the voters, smallest districts. We are the most connected to the people we represent. So by definition, we tend to be less of a focused on statewide perceptions of us as an institution. And so we are an easy target because collectively we do things that people may or may not like. But we do pay attention at home. That's why we're there, if we're doing our job correctly. And the examples that Ruth identifies are absolutely right. It's as open a place in terms of the information that flows as I recall it. I understand, however, that we are an easy target. No one speaks singly for the institution. I think, and I no longer worry about getting in hot water. I think it's absolutely clear, and everyone truly knows this, that parts of the ballot question on the transparency are unconstitutional and will not meet legal challenge, despite the views of the prime advocate. So what actually goes into effect, probably in terms of audit functions, will be dramatically different from what some people say publicly.
Well, and let me ask you then, because the House put forward what I think they would call maybe a compromise of allowing the auditor to choose the third-party agency that comes in and audits the legislature. Is that fair in your mind? Yeah.
Perfect example, because the notion of an outside audit is one that is conducted without bias or interest. And so what we did in a rule that was adopted a couple of weeks ago in an open vote, in an open session, was say, fine, yes, audit should take place. An independent auditor should conduct that. And so that any suggestion that someone who, or an office holder that has a stake in the outcome, so to speak, by virtue of past statements and conduct, will contract this out to a truly independent audit firm. To me, that's part of the ingrained idea that the voters adopted in November.
All right, let's move forward and look ahead. Our next two guests, they're going to be entering the legislature for the first time in January. What advice would you have for them?
My first piece of advice is to do a lot of listening, to meet all of their colleagues and to start becoming familiar with that there are 160 representatives. Each of us comes from a different district. As my colleague was just saying, his issues on the South Coast might have been different from what I was hearing from people in Newton. So my first suggestion is to meet as many of your new colleagues as you can and listen to them and hear what's important to them, because as was already stated, you can't get anything done alone. You have to develop relationships and eventually become part of a team to get things done. And the way you do that is for each of you to understand where you're literally where you're all coming from and who you're representing.
Bill?
Well, my advice is to look at the role you hope to adopt if you're incoming. You have one vote. The most consequential legislators I've had the privilege to serve with have an outsized role, as Ruth has done for herself in the mental health area, because when you speak, others listen, so to speak. And what that means is the role that I think an incoming legislator should strive for is to be someone who, when they express a view on a subject based on their knowledge and experience and ability to articulate things, others follow their lead. So maybe they have their one automatic vote, so to speak, but they bring influence with them. And that's the role I would encourage new legislators have. And so as a result, to follow on your theme, use your ears more than your mouth.
All right, great.
Representative
great
Ruth Balzer, as well as Bill Strauss, thanks so much for coming in and also just for your years of service to the Commonwealth. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks very much. Well, up next, we're going to meet two women who in January will join the legislature. We're learning what they heard from voters and what their priorities are.
Plus, my free advice to sitting lawmakers on Beacon Hill, why ignoring the will of the voters on one issue could prove costly. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back to At Issue. We just spoke with two lawmakers that are leaving Beacon Hill after decades of service in the legislature.
Now we'd like to welcome two of the 22 newcomers who will begin service on Beacon Hill in January.
Kelly Dooner is a Taunton City Councilor. She won a close Senate race to flip the seat held by retiring Senator Mark Pacheco from Democratic to Republican. And Amy Masanjolo is an attorney who works in the Consumer Protection Unit of the Attorney General's Office, a former Newton City Councilor. She won the seat being held by retiring Kay Kahn. Thanks so much to both of you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Great to see you. All right, Kelly, Beacon Hill can be a very lonely place for Republicans. You're the first woman Republican senator elected in nearly 2 decades. What inspired you to run, and what are the issues that you are going to be focusing on?
Yes, and I'll just add, I'm the first woman to ever hold this seat in particular, so that's something I'm really proud of, just to get some more women up there on Beacon Hill. What drew me to run for this seat, truthfully, I never really saw myself getting involved in politics, if I'm being totally transparent. I always volunteered on campaigns. I did work on Governor Baker's first campaign as a volunteer. I just liked helping candidates that, you know, I truly felt were in it for the right reasons and just wanted to make a difference. Fast forward, my husband and I, we just got married this past year, and we moved to Taunton, and I kind of quickly realized then and there just how impactful those decisions that are being made are, and how important it is just to make sure that every member in the community has a voice. So that kind of is, you know, what got me involved in the Taunton City Council. I hope to have children one day soon, and just making sure that, you know, we're electing people who are there to represent the people and represent everyone and be that extension of their voice. So that's what got me to run for City Council, and then fast forward to State Senate. You know, there's been a lot of challenges that the City of Taunton has been dealing with over the past year to 2 years, and being a city councilor, I just feel having that firsthand experience of the challenge that a municipality was having, that kind of is what made me want to step up and run for this seat and just really just be that voice and that line of communication. You know, serving as a councilor, I'll be very transparent. I just felt that not many people on Beacon Hill really cared what was happening in our community, and they didn't care the challenges that we were facing. And I just wanted to make sure that, you know, I could be that voice for people, and I could be that representation for them. So that's kind of really what drew me into this seat. But again, never really saw myself getting involved in politics until you really just start to understand how impactful the decisions that are being made are. And again, I hope to raise my children in this district. You know, it's a place that I call home. I love the area. Sure. And yeah, I just want to be able to be that voice for people and everyone across the district.
Yeah. Well, and Amy, I want to ask you pretty much the same question, which is just, you know, what brought you to the table in politics? What issues were you hearing about, and what priorities do you have?
So I first got involved in politics when almost 18 months after I moved to Newton. I ran for city council, and I served on the city council for 20 years. My concern was accountability to the residents. Like Kelly had mentioned, I think a lot of folks thought their representatives were not hearing, not listening, and to me that was very important. So I wanted to be a voice for those folks in my neighborhood as well as for the entire city. Kay Kahn has served admirably for the past 30 years, and so I never dreamed that the seat would ever open. But when she decided to retire, I thought I would step in.
What issues were voters telling you that they cared about?
Climate, for certain, public transit, as well as housing. Those are the top 3.
Amy and Kelly, you both ran for seats, as you mentioned, that were left open by retiring lawmakers. It is shocking to many people who move to this Commonwealth that it's rare to have a primary and rare that an incumbent gets beat. 65% of incumbents at Beacon Hill face no challengers whatsoever. So I'm wondering, Amy, start with you. If you can tell me, after running successfully, what were some of the challenges of running, and what was surprisingly easy to encourage other people to maybe throw their hat in the ring?
I don't know if it was very challenging. As I mentioned, I had served on the city council for 20 years, so I'm used to knocking doors and talking to folks and meeting people where they are. And I have great listening skills, so I think that was fairly simple for me. In terms of running against an incumbent, when I first got on the city council, I ran against an incumbent and I beat him by 12 votes. So I'm used to, facing tough challenges. So.
Yeah, I would say similar to Amy, when I first ran for council, I believe it was 19 going for 9 seats. And I was significantly younger than most people running, definitely didn't have the same amount of political experience as a lot of people running, but I just got out there. I knocked on 10,000 doors that election cycle. And, I just really, much like Amy said, just listening to, what concerns people are having, what challenges they're facing. And, every area is different, every neighborhood's different, every municipality is different. So, yeah, very similar to Amy. I just got out there and just made sure that I was listening to these people and hearing their concerns so that I can try and be that voice to help kind of, help them overcome the challenges.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's the work you did on the election trail, which led you all the way to Beacon Hill, now making your way through orientation. What is that process looking like? Are you talking with lawmakers that are already there and established? Is there a specific protocol? I'm not familiar. Go ahead.
Yeah, very new to me. Yeah. A couple of the senators and reps have reached out to congratulate me. For me right now, I've just been focused on not only putting a team together, but I made a promise to my district that I would hit the ground running on day one. So I'm just drafting my legislation now, and I intend to have that ready to go on day one. That was a promise I made, and I intend to fulfill it. So.
Yeah. Amy, any orientation, anything you're going through?
We have not scheduled an orientation yet. Yeah. I'm expecting to have one in mid-December, but I have also been reached out to by other colleagues in the state legislature, and I'm looking forward to working with them.
Well, great. Thanks to both of you for coming in, and best of luck as you make your way to Beacon Hill.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. And with that in mind, before we go, Sue, I understand you have some advice to share.
Yes, I do indeed, Matt. I have some free advice for Beacon Hill. Respect the voters' will. The recent passage of ballot question 1 granting State Auditor Diana DeZoglio the ability to audit the legislature has been met with dismissive attitudes from some lawmakers who may view it as a mere self-promotional stunt. However, state lawmakers would be wise to recognize the deeper significance of the voters' decision. While the measure may appear to lack substantial enforcement mechanisms, it has unquestionably resonated with Massachusetts voters who are demanding greater transparency in government. They have spoken clearly, and they are now carefully watching how you, their elected representatives, will respond to this mandate. This situation echoes a previous political maneuver that captured national attention, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' controversial decision to send migrants to Martha's Vineyard. That event unexpectedly made Massachusetts a border state, highlighted the dysfunction of our immigration policies, and may have helped re-elect Donald Trump. To the state senators, representatives, Attorney General Campbell, Governor Healy, and leadership of what is widely considered one of the least transparent states in the country, tread carefully. The public's patience is wearing thin, and attempts to circumvent or diminish the will of the voters could prove politically perilous.
Well, and over the last 2 weeks on that issue, they've gotten a chance to hear from the auditor as well as a couple of lawmakers. So hopefully viewers are getting a chance to sort of digest everything that's taken place.
Indeed.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Thanks so much for joining us for this edition of At Issue. Join us next Sunday when Boston Mayor Michelle Wu joins us to talk about a host of issues, including her property tax proposal and her re-election effort. Thanks for joining us. I'm Matt Pritchard.
And I'm Sue O'Connell. Have a great day.